This video will cover the material that was contained in the file VBA Class 4, Control Logic and Loops.xlsm, and you can download that file from the Files section for week 11, day 2. There's another file that you're going to need called Class 4 Loops and Debugging. .xlsm, so you might as well go get both of those because we're going to look at both of those today. This particular video will only deal with the file Control Logic and Loops. Right now you're looking at my split screen or my docked screen, and I've collapsed a little bit the project window and the properties window. I just wanted to bring to your attention a few things before we get started on the new loops. The new loops are quite useful. They don't rely on a specific condition to check for like the other ones do, like the do loops. But they are very useful for checking things for certain iterations or numbers of times, and we'll show you how to set that in a second. But first, a little bit of a review. As I was looking at some people's homework 5 and talking to some students, I realized that I probably should do a little bit of a review on what variables are and what they do and why you should use them. To do that, I'd like you to go ahead and open up your Visual Basic editor and take a look in Control Logic and Loops. Take a look at Sub-Calc Payment. I'd also like you to go in and go to the View menu and make sure that you're looking at your Locals window. Now, one thing that I saw when I was talking to students about homework 5 was kind of a need to return to the worksheet. And what our goal here is to actually do everything inside the program and not wasting a lot of processing power and memory power running back and forth and selecting cells and writing to cells and hiding cells and things like that, which is what was happening. People wanted to return to the worksheet to put values in so that they could refer to them in a function, for example. That's totally not necessary, and this is demonstrated here by the payment function, the payment that we're doing, and we're declaring variables here. These variables will all be part of the PMT function. And so we're saying basically dimension n months is an integer because we're going to use n months as n per in a payment function. APR, same thing. We're doing single because we're going to specify percentage. Price, currency, we're going to specify the PV. And then the payment itself is the result. And we're doing that as currency. Okay. Further, we have another thing down here called ants. And ants is the result of something that a user is putting down here, and I'm scrolling down here. The answer, or ants, is what happens in a message box. It's a yes-no. So VB yes-no, true, false, defaults to an integer. And so there we go. We need to represent that as an integer. And we could say if VB equals 6. Then, sorry, if ants equals 6, we'd still have a good result because that evaluates down to an integer. What I'd like to show you is how this plays out inside of a program. And here's what I want to emphasize to you. If you set everything up inside of the program, it's much more efficient as far as, like I said before, processing power, etc. But it could get a little bit confusing, which is why we're going to talk about planning programs in a minute. Well, longer than a minute. In the next video, that's when we're going to talk about that. Now we've got all these particular integers, sorry, it's been a long week already. We've got all these variables set up and we're going to use them. Locals window is going to show you something that might be a little bit helpful in visualizing this. So I'm going to go and do my F8 step through. Okay. The minute I hit F8, do you see what happens? I've got my sub calc payment lit up. I'm running through my sub. I'm on my first step. And what the VBE is doing when I hit that first F8, it's going to actually run through the code and check it for me first to make sure that I haven't messed up any of the code. This is where you're going to get a lot of your error messages, and when you go to debug, it will light up the line where the errors happen to be so that you can correct them. And again, you've probably seen from when I'm typing, most of the time it's because we're doing things like missing quotes or ending parentheses, etc. Anyway, so that's the first step. And then I'm going to once again continue. And notice what happens as we go down here in the locals window. This might be difficult to see, so you might want to be flipping back and forth. Look at the locals window, and I can't really zoom this too much because, well, I can't zoom this part at all, but down at the bottom, there is what's happening. We're doing a loop. It says it's looping, and we're doing a list of variables. So once I dim those variables, check it out. I've got my list of variables that I dimensioned. I've got end months, APR, price, payment, and ants. There it all is. Values right now, nothing, completely empty. So now I'm going to start setting variables equal to stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and hit F8. Okay, amount to finance, what I need to finance, you're going to see this. I have two screens, so I'm going to move this back over here. Amount to finance is 100, well, let's go 1,000. Let's be big spenders. Okay, so that's my input. Check it out. Right down here under price, now I have my value. So what this is showing you is that VBA is holding on to that value for you. And that's the purpose of a variable. As we loop through things, it's going to hold on to variables and look at things for you within loops as well. So again, I'm going to hit F8 and I get another dialog box, and this is the one where I'm going to enter the number of payment periods, and I'm going to make this 20 payment periods. I'm going to make that 20 months of payments. Okay. Check it out, and months now is 20. Now I get to enter my APR as a decimal. 7.6% interest. There we go. Okay, so now you see what I've got sitting inside of this variable. Now I'm going to actually calculate with those. So I've set all my variables up. I've got actually values in there, and I'm going to do the PMT function. So here we go, F8. I just did the PMT function. Notice what happened to payment. Payment now says 533915, okay, which is actually a currency data type. Then I get a message box, which I'll drag over here again because it's going to show up in my other screen. All of those variables, if you look at that message box, all contain values now, and I am able to print those values and format them in my message box. The next step, I'm going to ask the user if they want to record a value on a worksheet. So once I click OK, check it out, I still have my highlight going on with setting a variable value for ANS, which I can then use later in my if statement. And there goes my loan details. I'm going to pull this back over here. Would you like to record these values on the Save Values worksheet? And we can say either yes or no. I'm going to say no. And we're going to continue. Since I've said no, it's just going to continue to the else. Tell me goodbye without looping, or in this case, not looping. And then I am finished. Hopefully that kind of explains the situation with variables a little bit better. There was no need for me to go off to a worksheet to hold a variable as a container, or hold a value as a container. That cell will hold a value, but so will a variable. In other words, it won't interact with the worksheet until you tell it to. Again, efficient and elegant programming involves the use of variables wherever possible, and it involves not doing a lot of select statements and a lot of writing unless you absolutely need to do that writing. So take that to heart. I won't take off for stuff like that on homework 5, but in the future, as you're working through your situations, your programming problems, make sure that you set up variables for use. Okay, now we're still in, the module that we're in is actually the looping module. Right here, I've got a bunch of projects open right here, so just ignore. We're in class 4, control loops logic, and we're in the one module that's there, which is looping. So go ahead and click on looping, and you should see your sub window, which will look something like this. I'm going to go ahead and collapse this a little bit so we can see more of this. And make this a little wider because we don't really need to see all of that worksheet. So let's skip down to sub loop 4, or 3, sorry. So what is this? What is this for next loop, and what is this for each loop? Okay, let's start this off by kind of explaining what's happening with this code. We're going to be doing, grab my notes here. We're going to be doing something that's going to allow this to loop as many times as we tell it to. So this loop 3, our goal is to count the number of rows with values and then only loop that many times and do some formatting to each one. Okay, so we're going to check the value in cells that have values, and we're going to apply some styles based on what that value is. Let me just show you really quickly here what I'm talking about when I talk about styles. I am going to fly over here, make this a little bit bigger, excuse my messy desktop. But if you go over to Styles right here on the ribbon, this is on the Home tab under Styles. If you look here, we've got normal, good, bad, and neutral. We're going to actually apply the styles good, bad, and neutral depending on values. Okay? So what I'd like you to do is go back to your sub, now that you know what we're going to do here. You can make the locals window a little bit smaller. We're going to count the number of rows. So what I'd like you to do under the comment that says counting rows, n rows equals, we're going to take sheet 4, which actually is the saved loan values. Let me remind you too that we need to call it by what the sheet is. If you go over here and look at the VBA project and in the correct file, you'll see that sheet 4 has the caption saved loan values. We need to refer to it as sheet 4. So n rows equals, and you'll remember the selection that we did earlier when we talked about how we're going to select cells or go to particular cells or select entire ranges. This time we're going to do similar syntax in order to use the count action. So sheet 4 dot range D2, so we're going to start in D2 right here, comma, range, quote, D2, quote, dot end, XL down, and that's going to go in the direction of down, and it's going to look at each row and each cell in that row and count until it reaches the end of any values, until it encounters a blank cell. As you know, count will do. Count will count all non-blank cells. Note too that it's going to stop at a blank cell. So right now we're going to assume that there are no blank cells in the middle of our column. We're just going to assume that we actually have stuff written to each one. Next, we're going to take that count and we're going to use that count in order to apply formatting. Okay, so n rows equals the number of rows that VBA counted with data in them. Now here's that loop. So go ahead and go in and we're going to work through this, and I'll give you some time to type. For I equals 0, okay, and we're going to loop through and apply formatting based on cell value. For I equals 0, and notice what I is. We didn't even look at that. N rows. Over here, what we've done is the same line. We've continued a list of dimensioning, which is an integer. So I is our counter in this situation. We could use anything we wanted as a counter or as a name. We could have called it row count, or we could have called it counter. It doesn't matter. But it's the variable that's holding the integer that is the result of the count function. For I equals 0 to the number of rows, n rows, minus 1. Okay? With, and we're going to put in a with and end statement to make things a little bit more efficient. Sheet 4, range D2, and we're using the offset again. We're going to tell it to go I down in the same column, 0. So I down in the same column, 0. If the value is greater than or equal to 1,000, then style equals bad. Else if, and notice we now have an else if in here that we were continuing to make our ifs more complex. Dot value is greater than or equal to 500, then dot style equals neutral, else dot style equals good, end if, and with. Keep looping until we reach the number of rows minus 1. And you'll probably be able to see this better as we loop through it. So I'm going to give you a second and pause this for a second, show you a call out that has the actual code in it so you can type it in. When you're ready, go ahead and start it up again, and then we'll step through it and I'll explain it. Okay, we're back, and hopefully you have the code typed in. Remember, comment and indent whenever you need to. So let's take it and start to take note of the locals window as well. And start stepping through subloop 3. Again, there's our n rows now holding nothing, and I now holding nothing, our counter. n rows equals sheet 4 range D2. Notice how I'm watching over here also in my docked window. Now that once I hit F8 here, I'm going to fill up my n rows with a number. Rather, I'm going to get an error. Let's see what's going on. I had a bunch of worksheets open. In fact, I had another copy of this that had another open that had another sheet 4 in it. And so because I didn't specify the workbook object, it got confused and it couldn't go in and find that object that I wanted, and therefore sent me a message. So, got rid of those, closed all those other workbooks, and now we're fine. Now, notice that I went through and I did my n rows already, and now I'm looping. I've got the number of rows that I'm working with is 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And note that I started in D2. Okay. You could also start in D1, but you'd have to mess around with the math again, which is what we're going to do here. For I equals 0, we're starting at 0, and we're going to let it go up to 5 minus 1. Okay, so n rows minus 1. Because we're starting here, we're already sitting in D2, 1, 2, 3, 4. It only has to loop through 4 times. We don't want it to go to this blank cell. Okay, there we go. N rows is 0, sorry, n rows is 5, I is still 0, haven't stepped through the loop yet. With sheet 4 range D2, okay, if the value is greater than or equal to 1000, then style equals bad. Value is greater than or equal to 500. Oh, we're bad. So it skipped right forward, went to end if, and now it's hitting the next one. Notice the counter as I go through it. Now it's at 1. So we're going one more. Now it's looping through twice. That first time wasn't a loop. Now we're looping. Third time. Fourth time. And we're done. Okay? We've just ended. So let's see what happened here. We now have all of our formatting set. So we've got bad, neutral, and good. Let's save ourselves a few minutes here and run down here and do a new sub called Clear Styles. So we're gonna put this in here. Clear Styles, and this is gonna cover a little bit that we didn't get to on the other day when we did do loops. Go ahead and start this sub. We're going to take that range that we just formatted and we're going to remove the formatting. Okay. So sub Clear Styles, and I'm going to comment this like a good girl. I should have done this before. The sub will clear formats, styles, and also adjust column width. Again, I'll put this in a call out for you and pause it when we finish this. First step, remember those object variables? Just a little bit of a review. We're taking a format range and we're going to dim it as a range. Okay. So when I go in here and do stuff to it, which I'm going to do down here, I'm going to actually change the name here just to show you what happens. Remember that once it's set, once it's good and set to go, I get my capitalization to match. It tells me that that's okay. Alright. Now, the commands that you need. We're going to dim format range as range. We could also just select it, but I wanted to show you the object variable, because now I can go through and use this variable over and over again to do different things. So I'm set. Remember, object variables need the keyword set. Format range equals range D2 down to the end. Okay, so set format range, range D2 to range D2 dot end XL down. Now, once again, with ST range, now if I'd left it that way, I would have gotten a big old error message once I hit F8, variable not defined. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to show you what that does. With format range dot clear formats dot style equals currency, and then end with, and then we're going to jump down and sheet 4 dot columns autofit. Notice I went outside of the end with because the end with now only refers to that little range that I set it to up here. So I'm going to pause for a minute and let you type that in. Okay, we're back, and you can test your code, but before we do, let's go in here and remember about buttons. We're going to go to the Excel sheet right now and make sure your developer tab is showing. Remember to do that. File, Options, Customize ribbon, and then go over to the right and make sure the developer tab is selected. We're going to go over to the Insert command under Controls, and we're going to hit the button form control. There are two kinds of form controls here. We've got ActiveX controls, which do a whole lot more than our form controls. We're going to stick with form controls for right now. And I'm going to go ahead and put in a little button here. Make it a big button. And I'm going to go ahead and assign loop 3 to it. And remember that you have to go in here and click inside to be able to edit it. And I'm going to hit the delete key to get rid of button 4. Yours may be numbered differently because I did this before and cut the buttons out. We're going to call this run sub loop 3. Then what we're going to do is add another button. We haven't written this sub yet, but we're going to get this out of the way while we're at it. I'm going to add another button here, same thing. And I'm going to make this loop 4. Nothing's going to happen when I hit it because I haven't written it yet. But run sub loop 4. And then one more button. And we're going to put our clear styles sub on that and call it, whoops, shouldn't have done that. We're going to call it clear formats. Okay. Go ahead and clear your formats, and that's going to auto adjust everything. You'll see that your APR is coming out really weird, and that is because, again, it's a single format, and it's not going to give us exactly what we actually typed in there. It's going to take it to a different set of a different kind of precision. So we can mess with that later as far as formatting goes, but that's what it's going to look like. Okay, so there's everything. Things cleared, auto adjusted. So let's run the sub loop again. There it goes. Clear formats. Sub loop 4. Well, I lied. I basically have already written that, and you haven't, so let's go ahead and do that. So let's go over to sub 4, go back to my scroll up a little bit. This loop demonstrates for each, and here's the special thing about for each. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this because it's the same principle. For each next actually works really well with object variables. Hint, this might do you a lot of good on homework 6 because you're going to be doing a little bit of work with some objects as well as values and cells. So for each next, useful with object variables, and in order to make this work, which we already have, we've got several rows present in the saved values worksheet that we're going to work through. Let me take one more second here to run up here back to the for each loop, or for next loop, apologize. Notice up here where I said that the offset, where I set the offset and the counter, I can actually, if I go up here, for I equals 0 to n rows, this note I have up here, it says step 2. If I had uncommented that out, what you're telling the loop is to actually increment by 2 rather than by 1. By default, it's going to count 1 by 1 by 1. If you want it to count in any other way, you can use the step keyword and a number to tell it what the increment should be. I'm going to comment that back, just because I don't want to do that when I test it. Alright, back down here. Same thing, pretty much. And notice that I just did this for fun. I've got the data range as range, and then I went over here and I said, well, I just wanted dim basketball as range. Alright. It doesn't matter what your variable name is, it's just going to hold that object. So let's say I'm holding a basketball. I want to give it a name so I can use it later. Okay, so we've got our data range, basketball, whatever it is you want to call it. But notice that basketball, I'm just going to make it a little more lucid. I'm going to call it a sheet cell as range. Okay, and then down here I'm going to make that, make basketball sheet cell so you know what we're doing. So, and once again, type in your comments if you need to for notes, and I will give you time to pause and type in the code from a call out. Set data range equals sheet 4. Okay, we've got our data range and sheet cell object variables there. Notice now we don't have a counter. We don't need one. Set data range equals sheet 4 dot range d2 all the way down to the end. Okay. Wherever there's values, it'll end when the values stop being entered at the blank cell. Loop through each cell in the data range and apply formatting based on the cell value. So here's the fun part. Okay. For each. So we're looking at for each object in this object. So for each sheet cell in data range, it's going to go through and do something different. Okay, we've got a little more elegant way of saying if, then, if else, else if, whatever it is we're doing up top. This is the select statement, select case statement. Select case is just testing the cell, much like if does, case by case. So we're going to provide it with the criteria for what the case is, just like we do with an if, and then it's going to go ahead and go through this. Okay. So notice I've used basketball all the way through here. I'm just going to go ahead and change it again to make sure that it's clear what's happening here. And notice if I hit F8 right now, it's just going to give me all kinds of big errors that says the variable is not defined. So I'm going to copy and paste this through. And there we go. So the select statement is select case sheet cell dot value. Case is greater than or equal to 1000, sheet cell style bad. Case is greater than or equal to 500, sheet cell style is neutral. Case else, sheet cell style equals good. So it's very much like an if statement. And then end select. And then loop through for the next object in the range. So for each sheet cell in data range, etc., etc. So I'm going to go ahead and let you type this in. Okay, we're back. And what I want to do here is, once again, I'm going to test it and run it clear formats. Okay. Just for fun though, let's hit F8 on this again. So loop 4, check it out, there is our variable down there telling us what the type it is and the value it's in, and it acts a little bit differently, doesn't it? There really isn't a whole lot for it to tell as far as a value. It's an object, right? So we're still saying it's a range. And we're going to step through it until the end, until we hit end sub. Okay? Great. So those are the loops that finishes out this class. In the next video, I'm going to talk to you about planning your programs, and I'm going to talk to you about thinking through how you would write these. And it's going to be very important, so give this next video that we do a little bit of attention. And have it ready, have whatever you're doing ready for class on Tuesday. And this is the end.